This is the Spurs POSTCAST, your instant game reaction for the San Antonio Spurs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
On the night we awaited Victor Wembanyama's return, on the night that everyone in the sports media world, heck, all the world, was just saying, you know what, this Victor guy is going to come back pretty PO'd. On the night that the Spurs would look to get the upper hand on the Minnesota TImberwolves and get within one win closer of getting back to the Western Conference Finals, it's all that and then some, and takes all of it for the San Antonio Spurs tonight to get the victory and get the better of the Minnesota Timberwolves and go up 3-2 in their best of 7. Welcome into the Spurs POSTCAST right here on Locked On Spurs, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network in the world. He is NBA champion Devin Brown. I'm KC Viera, just a couple minutes removed from the San Antonio Spurs' decisive, convincing 126-97 victory in Game 5 of the Western Conference semifinals. They have a 3-2 lead. They are one win away from getting back to the Western Conference Finals for the first time in a long time. My friend, again, it took a little bit of everybody. It was Victor. He had some moments, but to say it was just number one would be silly because it took a solid 15 to get this thing done tonight.
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody, to the show. Casey, we got some things to break down for Game 5. We're going to look forward a little bit to Game 6, a little bit. But let's have a great show. Let's do it.
This is what you'll be talking about.
All right, so as you know, Wemby kicked out of the game the other day for elbowing Naz Reid in the throat. So like I said from the jump, a lot of people were saying, oh, Victor's going to come back and he's going to have his measure of redemption and he's going to go completely nuclear on these Timberwolves because he is not happy. And through the first 6 minutes, all those people who were saying that, they were exactly correct because in the first 6 minutes of the game, not even, he scores 16 points. 16 points, and the Spurs open up a 24-9 lead. And go figure, Wemby resides to the bench, and promptly that lead gets cut all the way down to a 4-point margin at the end of the first quarter of play. Victor finishes with 18 in the first quarter at that 34-30 margin between the two. Spurs get off to a good start. Quick 9-0 spurt right off the rip to start the second quarter on a high note. And it'd be kind of a continuous theme for this Spurs team to really, I guess, well, now that I say that, it was kind of runs on both sides. It really, I articulate this more now, and this was kind of really your cliche game of runs through the first 3 quarters. Spurs open up the second quarter on a 9-0 run, in part to Minnesota shooting 4 of 17. And as a result, the Spurs ultimately see themselves go up by 18. It's contributed, again, contributions not just from Victor. Keldon Johnson snapped out of his funk tonight. He had 8 points by the time they hit half, and ultimately the Spurs go up by 12 heading into the break. That's because they missed their final 8 shots heading into halftime, and they stayed equally as cool going into the other side of the break. Minnesota gets something going. And in part was because the Spurs just could not get that rhythm going in the half court at all in any capacity. And being so limited that Minnesota is on the offensive end outside of Anthony Edwards right now, the defense leading to offense is what ignites things. And ultimately 14-2 right from the second that 12-minute mark ticks down in the third quarter. And we're tied at 61. Insert Dylan Harper, insert Keldon Johnson midway through that third. And it completely changes the dynamic of the way the things were looking the rest of the way. Because after that 14-2 run to start the third, San Antonio, the rest of the quarter, check this out, closes on a 30-12 run and ultimately have an 18-point lead going into the fourth quarter. A couple flurries here and there from Minnesota to get within 11, but by the time it was, really time for the Spurs to call off the dog, so to speak, and I guess put away Minnesota for good. They did exactly that, and ultimately the math reads a 126-97 victory. Wemby, 27-17, 5 blocks or 5 assists, 3 blocks in the highly anticipated redemption matchup. Fox with 18 of 6 of 15 shooting. Keldon, 21 points off the bench, his best showing of the postseason by far. Dylan Harper, 12 points, 10 rebounds, 5 of them from the offensive variety. Anthony Edwards had 20 in the defeat. It was impressive. It was impressive. They got knocked down a few times when Minnesota was off and running, and Spurs half court was looking ugly, and they responded, and they did it in a real impressive fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. To your first point, Wemby, being ejected from that game and, having to face your teammates as they're coming in after a tough loss in game 4, and then being around them for a day of practice, being on the plane, things like that, it wears on you. So as the best player, you have to step up, and that's what he did. He did that. He set the tone from the get-go. He was tremendous. We all know how Wemby is. He didn't want to let his teammates down again, so he came out, had a big game. The game itself, if you're Coach Mitch, when you get leads like that in the playoffs, you have to take it to another level and get rid of these teams, really, knock them down. But to Minnesota's credit, they were able to fight in there. And that was with their starters. Now, we've talked about this in the past where, they didn't get much out of AO, whatever. And out of, IO, whoever, and Shannon Jr. But that's the thing. That's what makes these teams good, is when your bench players on the road can kind of keep you in the game, and then your stars take over. Well, Minnesota, if you're looking at that, if you're looking at the game film, you didn't get that. You're going to need that in the next one to come back to San Antonio, just like San Antonio is going to need the others to step up and let Wemby try and win game 6. Same thing. So, and then my last point was Harper and Keldon. They were tremendous. That's what you need. I just talked about that right now. They came off the bench, Casey, and they were great. Harper was fantastic, not only offensively, but defensively. The blocks, the deflections. So, Casey, when you look at this, the Spurs did what they were supposed to do, take care of home, win game 5. Now, when you're going on the road, you should feel comfortable, Mitch should, with some of these guys coming off the bench. And if they have to play heavy minutes, you should feel good about that.
Yeah, Stephon Castle, he finished with 17 points, 4 boards, 6 assists. Minnesota was very hampered on the offensive side of the ball, even more so than what it has been. Ant played 39 minutes, and that was even kind of in a blowout situation. So if this game was competitive, there's a world that he probably would have finished with right around 45, so to speak. But Julius Randle gave them nothing. I don't want to say nothing, but close to 6 of 17 from the field. Rudy Gobert pretty much got played off the floor tonight. It felt like complete non-factor. Wemby was going at him, in that first quarter, that barrage. Maybe that's exactly what Victor needed to see. Right across from him. And I wonder if that kind of played a factor, because Victor from the jump, I really wouldn't be surprised if that part ignited it too, knowing that Gobert was in front of him, because Rudy, who has played okay in this series, who hasn't had a bad series, Gobert, but tonight, I mean, Victor just ate him up.
Yeah, well, Casey, I got to protect the player sometimes when you heavyweights in the media, you guys go after certain players, but let's remember who he was guarding in the first series, the Joker. So he played tremendous. He's been tremendous up until this point. Hey, but at some point, Rudy's got to come back to earth, and that was tonight, Casey. I just wanted to mention that.
He did. In many respects, Spurs shoot 53% from the field this evening. They win the glass 50-42. Obviously big in that capacity. Minnesota held to less than 30% from 3, 27% from distance, 39 overall. Let's revisit that stretch in the middle of the third quarter, spearheaded by Keldon, spearheaded by Dylan Harper, which really turned things for the better.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
And for as well as the Spurs have played in this postseason, in these playoffs so far, Keldon largely, for the most part, has not really been a contributing factor to it. He's had his moments, but especially in this series, he's had a really hard time getting into that flow, whether it be the struggles just going, that bull in China shop doesn't particularly work great when you have Rudy and Randall and McDaniels for you at the finish line. And he never really was able to get into that flow through the first 4 games, it felt like. But tonight, made his first 2 buckets. I think he needed that, and that settled him real solid. And then the rest of the way, when you got Dylan Harper out there, right there with you, igniting that fire, making you feel good, it helps in the cause. So it was good to see KJ bounce back tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Him and Harper were tremendous. And, that's why we picked those guys for the turning point, because you saw it right there in that third quarter, Casey. It was plain as day. What I'm seeing out of the starters is these junk defenses, right? Where they're switching, they're double teaming and things like that. When you come in with Harper and Keldon, you're not having to do that. Now you have 5 solid guys out there playing defense. There's not a whole lot of overhelp, and that's what Minnesota is struggling with. And for about 3 or 4 minutes, they really struggled with that. The Spurs were able to pull, get a good lead, and, from there. So when you talk about, what Harper and Keldon did offensively, really, for me, it was really big, because you stack stops, 1 stop, 2, 3, 4, and that's why they were able to pull away.
Let's talk about where things kind of went wrong, I guess, prior to that, which the events that essentially prompted them to go to Harper, go to Keldon, and ignite things. Minnesota went into a 2-3 zone, and just knocked the Spurs out of whack.
Right.
They were all over the place.
Right.
Castle and Fox, excuse me. It felt like they were just kind of taking turns. I just said halfback dive. What they were doing, it was just going right into the paint, and and as a result, the way Minnesota is going to win these games, because they're so thin on the offensive side of the basketball right now, is to take advantage of your errant shots and your poor shot selection, which is exactly what it was in those first few minutes. It was awful. I think I actually texted you too. I was apparently they forgot Victor existed.
Yeah.
They completely veered away from him.
Hey, sometimes your eyesight messes up and you can't see the 7'5" guy. I don't know. It's weird. Yeah, it happens to you. Your vision, but it's crazy because you did text me that, and I'm just sitting there looking, and I'm like, no, what it is these guys are, you hear all these things about, hey, don't just go to Vic. Well, they were trying to force it to him, a lob here, a lob there, trying to get it to him. Minnesota is like sitting in a zone, and that's what made Tom Brady so good for years, is you got to pick apart that zone. But, De'Aaron Fox and Castle were not Tom Brady, so they kept turning it over. And then Mitch calls timeout, and the first play out of a timeout, which is very important to a coach, they turn it over again, trying to hit Victor in the middle of the lane. So that's what prompted Mitch to get those guys out of there, right? But it just seemed like they were trying to get it to Wemby, and then they were doing their own thing, trying to get in the lane. Minnesota's on a run, and then they push the ball up and try and get in the lane again. Yeah, that's going to be a downfall. You can't have that in Game 6. You got to make sure that you value the ball, value possessions. So it's going to be interesting to see, because really the rest of the time you can't have those lapses, not for 5, 6, 7 minutes.
They went on a stretch in the middle of the third quarter there, where, actually, if you continue it to the back end, where they missed 8 consecutive shots to end the second, they missed 12 of 13. Excuse me, it was 13 of 14, and then 1 of 6 before Mitch made the sub, brought in Harper and Keldon, and the rest of the night wrote itself out from there. But it was listen, every playoff win is a good win. You take it. I was going to say it's a good win, beyond good win, and now a chance to do something they haven't done, like we said, get back to the Western Conference Finals for the first time in nearly a decade. So how exactly do they do exactly that? Well, we're going to hit on it coming up on the other side with the closeout game on deck, on its way, coming up Friday in Minneapolis. That and a little bit more for you right here on the Spurs Postcast on Locked On Spurs. Hey, but let's talk about maybe an aspect of something that Spurs, perhaps, Keldon, Dylan Harper, perhaps popped a couple 5-hour energies. I don't know per se, but they look pretty good, pretty spry coming off the bench. Maybe that new fruity rainbow they got out right now, because if you got a sweet tooth, you know how tough it is to find that perfect treat without the sugar. 5-hour energy fruity rainbow, they've got you covered with the tasty caffeine kick. As you know, they always do. Quick, easy, and a way to satisfy that sweet craving while keeping things simple and on the go. Get candy-flavored chaos with Fruity Rainbow 5-hour energy shots, available at 5hourenergy.com or at Amazon. All right, our pals over there at KALSHI, obviously during the playoffs, so a whole lot of time to stay busy and keep your eyes on things. If you're unfamiliar with KALSHI, this is what they're about. You can trade every single playoff game, every series, the conference finals, the championship, all that good stuff. How it works is you're trading against your peers in a live market, meaning there's no house that you're going up against, and probabilities changes along the way. So you can buy in and buy out of your position. For a limited time, download the app and use code LOCKEDON to get $10 off when you trade 10, KALSHI. That's KALSHI. Trade on anything. 18 plus restrictions and eligibility requirements do apply. Event contracting involves risks and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, head on over to kalshi.com/regulatory. All right, keeping eyes on the pennies, pinching pennies. It's that time of year when the playoffs, right? We've got to save every dime in the piggy bank if we're going to go to potentially the Western Conference Finals. That's for you to decide, but I'm going to help you save a couple bucks along the way doing that. Why? Well, keeping track of your subscriptions is not particularly easy when you're pairing it with your bills and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Life can overwhelm you fast. That's where Rocket Money comes in, helping you take control of your finances all in one place. It tracks, does everything from keeping track of the simple dollar signs, but this is the aspect of it that I really love. It lets you know your subscriptions, what you're paying for, all in one place. So you're not missing out on those couple extra bucks that you could be losing along the way. Personal Finance, it's an app that takes care of it for you and helps you lower the bills so you can grow your savings. Head on over to Rocket Money, and it helps you reach your financial goals faster. Join rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right. So the conversation continues right here on the Spurs postcast on Locked On Spurs as we get ready to have a conversation about Game 6 coming up on Friday. Buddy Devin Brown just had to step aside for a moment, get something tuned up. So we'll check back with him hopefully by the end of the program. All right. So Game 6, Friday. 8:30 tip-off time. What we're kind of looking for. I felt that going into this Game 6, that regardless of how kind of tonight went, I felt that the rest of the series was going to kind of play out in a fashion where it was going to be the home team wins the rest of the way. And,
that's right.
Yeah, and what I look... The reason I say that is because Minnesota is just kind of a veteran squad, and I just could not see a veteran team like that going out on their home floor in that fashion. But let's talk about kind of the kill shot aspect of it, because you've been in locker rooms where you've gone on the road knowing that you had a chance to clinch, knowing you had a chance to get out of there and keep playing some bigger basketball in the upcoming weeks ahead. We know that the Spurs are in a spot, they have succeeded in a closeout game already, getting rid of the Trailblazers, but that was in San Antonio. How big of a difference is it trying to do the same on the road, especially in an environment like Minneapolis?
Well, I mean, it's great experience as this Spurs franchise continues to move forward with these young guys, in the sense that this is going to be, your first time as a group, trying to win a big game on the road. So the experience itself is going to be good. They should be used to the atmosphere. It's going to be a little bit more grit and grind type of basketball game. You got to take Minnesota's best shot, but you want to get Minnesota fighting uphill all game against you. You've had some success in, up there in Minnesota, but you got to understand that Minnesota's going to scratch and claw. Victor's going to be on the ground another 50 to 60 times during this basketball game. So you just have to withstand that, keep your wits about you, play the game all the way through, and let the end just happen, whatever happens. But you don't want if I'm Mitch, I'm telling them I don't want to go and mess around with Minnesota for a game 7. They've been to the Western Conference Finals 2 years in a row, so I don't want to mess with it. We got to take care of business. That starts in that first quarter, game 6.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What did you think of the way that tonight was officiated? And I say that because I think, yes, the favorable whistle always goes with the home team, and it'll probably go back that way again in game 6. What did you think of the aspect of it tonight? And do you think all the chatter that the past 48 hours have been since the elbow, do you think that played a capacity in anything tonight, and will it the rest of the way going into 6?
Absolutely, it did. You saw the 3 or 4 times that caught my eye. Again, I'll go watch the game, maybe have a higher number for you. But you really saw when that whistle was blown, there was one deal. Victor got the offensive foul. He hit Jaden McDaniels in the face. When he continued, it was either Nas or somebody took a shot at him when he went up. Mm-hmm. And the ref immediately stepped in there, and he told them, don't do that. Mm-hmm. That's what they're trying to clean up. That's what Victor and Mitch are talking about. Now, on the other side of that, if there is a foul called, all right, normally you stop. This is not hockey, right? That's where fights break out because you get a little slap shot at that goalie. They're afraid someone's going to get hurt. So there's fights immediately after that when the whistle is blown. In basketball, you always see someone continue, take a shot, whatever it is. Well, if you're Nas, you're like, well, tell him not to shoot the basketball or tell him not to come in here after the whistle's blown. So there's a 50-50 thing. But to your point, when it involved Vic, they immediately would step in there and tell that Minnesota player, do not touch him, don't hit him, no extra stuff. But I did see that tonight, yes.
Mm-hmm. I thought so too. I wasn't overly surprised because I didn't think I figured it'd be called a little bit tighter. I figured the Spurs would get the benefit of the whistle. They did on both fronts, but I don't think it veered too far away kind of what the norm is of a playoff game following something that happens like that. Right. I don't think that there was anything kind of overly egregious one side of the other. I know fans around here, they haven't been crazy seeing Victor go down because they feel like he's been getting knocked around. But if we're being diplomatic here, it's been a pretty consistently officiated series in that it's just been hellacious all the way around. And so I kind of felt that it was more of just kind of the same of this game 5. They did call it. Yeah, I'm with you. I think they did call it a little bit tighter. And I mean, Spurs ain't going to complain. Spurs.
No, and at the end of the day, I mean, whatever it is that Coach Finch will say, or whatever it is their players are thinking. Yeah. As far as you're on the Minnesota side, of course, you have victors, you have losers. But at the end of the day, you can say whatever you want, but you still have to, on a road in a game 5 like this, you have to make shots. Mm-hmm. And that's what Minnesota didn't do. So if I'm them, I wouldn't waste my energy on that. I got to make sure that we can get our offense together good enough to force a game 7.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they have it right now. I don't know. I don't know if the answer is for the Timberwolves to start Naz Reid. Maybe that's it the rest of the way. I think it was Reggie on the broadcast was saying that might be the move because with Dante out and just the fact that the Spurs are a tremendous defensive team already, of course, just trying to put the pieces together, whatever which way you can. They're just struggling to find points, and it just feels like it's one of these things where the Spurs, and you saw it in the third quarter, that felt like more Spurs losing than Timberwolves winning. The Spurs were leaving the opportunity, leaving those opportunities open for the Timberwolves to do what they did. And to their credit, they got back into it. And it ultimately didn't work out on the Timberwolves side of things. But I think going forward, they're going to have to find if this game 6 is going to be competitive, which it probably will be. And if they have a chance to win, that's probably the better way of phrasing it. They'll probably have to figure that out. Yeah.
You know what I want to see? I want to see moving forward that when you say that Edwards is on a minutes restriction. It's supposed to be 25. I don't know how this is the third or fourth game we've got to 39. They need to follow the doctor's orders and play him 25 minutes. That's what I want to see moving forward.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Just happened conveniently. It comes right at a closeout game.
Yeah, and guess what, Casey? It might get to 45. It ain't going to happen. They're not listening to me.
Yeah. How convenient. Who would have thought? All right. Let's talk about our player of the game tonight.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
A much needed showing tonight for Keldon Johnson.
Yeah, absolutely. Keldon was great. Came in there, provided the energy. You know, we had been on him last couple of shows because that 6th man of the year. Ever since then, he's been on a 6-person vacation. But he showed up tonight. It was great. Good to see him back. And they're going to need him come game 6. Big time. Not only him, but the others. But he was great tonight, Casey.
Yeah, much needed performance in this convincing Game 5 victory. All right. You, of course, know where to catch us on Friday when Game 5, or Game 6, I should say, comes to a close. That's an 8:30 tip-off, but we'll be right here on the Spurs postcast on Locked On Spurs, hopefully talking about a series-clinching victory. But as we've come to learn in these playoffs, anything is a given. You are not going to want to go anywhere far tomorrow, though. You're going to want to come back right here at 9:15 for the Spurs Squad Show. Myself, Devin, and the host of the title pod, Matthew Tynan, will be recapping all this stuff and looking ahead to Game 6. If you guys know, have been at the party before, you know it's some real good stuff for you Spurs fans out there. You're not going to want to miss it. Again, as always, shout out to you guys. You've showed up again on a Tuesday night in a game that was kind of a blowout. Still a strong turnout from you guys. Fun chat. Let us know where you're checking in from on your way out the door, by the way. Good night for the Spurs. They got a 3-2 series lead and a chance to put a bow on this thing and face OKC, but they got to do it in Minneapolis first on Friday. So for my good buddy, Mr. NBA champion Devin Brown, I'm Casey Viera. Have a nice night, and we'll talk to you on the Squad Show tomorrow.